click subscribe and click the notification bell, and I promise I'll call off that hit. We've explored the forests, the countryside, farms, and back roads. Now, let's head straight into civilization, where crime is at its highest. The following allegedly true stories come from the city. With so many people packed together in a smaller space, and with so many places to hide, there's bound to be something terrifying within each and every dimly lit alleyway. Enjoy these urban horror stories. If you want your story in an episode of the show, submit it today at darknessprevails.org/submit. I'm currently looking for stories that take place in snowstorms or blizzards, but all stories are always accepted. Thank you. Also, you can find this show on all your favorite podcasting services like Stitcher, iTunes, SoundCloud, Castbox, and more, so be sure to subscribe or follow me there. But always remember, the newest episodes and all episodes will always air on my YouTube channel. The Woman and the Baby by Isa. This story took place in Brazil a long 15 years ago, but it still gives me chills to this day, even though it didn't happen to me. I have an uncle who works as a truck driver, delivering tires for a company. Between many crazy stories that happened to him between comings and goings, this one is the creepiest that he's ever told me. He said it was a Friday noon, and he only had a few tires to deliver in the city, and had just stopped at a gas station to have lunch, or at least eat something to get him through the long road ahead at a convenience store. With the meal out of the way, he walked back to his truck, starting the engine and stepping on it, eager for the weekend. However, a few minutes after taking off, my uncle spots a lone woman walking on the street. He slowed down after seeing that she was carrying a baby in her arms. He said his heart begged him to give the woman a ride. He has always been a benevolent guy, always looking forward to help others, so this sudden urge to do well isn't unlike him at all. He waited until she passed by his truck to ask her if she would like a ride in a friendly tone. She glanced at him without a smile. She hesitated for a long moment. Then he spoke up and said where he was going, to the neighboring city. She nodded, still with a firm expression, then checked her baby under the large blanket, protecting him from the hot light of the sun, before hopping into the back seat. My uncle said that the woman seemed to be in her late 30s and looked beaten up by life. He tried to make small talk, but she avoided conversation and eye contact at all costs, always looking back on the road and checking nervously on her baby, as if they were being followed or something like that. He just assumed that she was a victim of domestic abuse and was likely running away from a crappy husband. He felt terribly sorry for her. A couple of hours go by with little conversation. At this point, he had decided to leave her alone. She still looked impatient, holding the baby firmly in her arms. The sun was setting when my uncle got stuck in a traffic jam at a bridge that connected the two cities. In the 3 long hours on the road, my uncle had finally gotten her name, which was Maria, and the name of her newborn baby girl, Helena, which my uncle assumed was a girl. Assuming was all he could do, because she kept the baby wrapped up in that blanket the entire time. Still stuck in the middle of uncountable cars and their impatient drivers, he felt uneasy when he realized that Helena never cried, not even once. That was unusual for a newborn, to say the very least. Maria asked if she could roll down the windows, saying that she needed some fresh air. He agreed, not thinking much of it. Between trying to keep bad thoughts out of his mind and driving slowly over the bridge, he looked back at Maria through the rearview mirror, seeing something that made his stomach turn. His heart began to race. The wind coming through the lowered windows had now uncovered the baby's face. He couldn't tell if it was indeed a girl or a boy, but the baby had a very pale face, and its eyes were shut. Not one bit of that baby was moving at all. Almost as if it was... He kept his eyes on the road, looking away from the woman, who now had covered the baby's face again, seemingly getting more nervous. She then asked, "How long until we get there?" My uncle looked at her one last time through the rearview mirror, putting on his best fake smile. "A few minutes," he answered. "But if you don't mind, Maria, I haven't had a proper meal all day, and it's getting dark. Would you mind if we make a quick stop at the nearest gas station?" She hesitantly nodded, agreeing nervously, as usual. My uncle thought a plan through a few times in his head on the way to a nearby gas station. When they arrived, he pulled up and jumped out, asking Maria if she needed anything, even offering to pay for her dinner. She denied, deciding to stay behind in the truck before asking one more time if it was going to take him very long. She looked distressed. He politely said he would be right back, heading into the convenience store. He went into the bathroom and locked himself inside. Feeling unsettled, he wondered to himself, what if that woman was dangerous? What if that baby wasn't actually hers? But what if the woman actually needed his help, and he was just being paranoid? He wondered, while dialing for the police. He figured the safest thing would be reporting this to the authorities. He reported everything to the operator, only to find out that the description he provided of the woman in his truck matched a sought-after woman investigated by the police for many children's disappearances. Hearing this, his heart sank, and he promptly informed that she had a baby with her. The operator told him that the police were only a few minutes away and that he should stay on the line until they got there. Moments later, he heard sirens and let out a breath of relief. He began to step out of the bathroom and told the operator that he heard that the police were arriving. The cops opened the truck, got the woman and the baby out, pointing their weapons at her. A female officer rushed to get the baby in her arms, while my uncle watched everything from a safe distance in disbelief. He finished the call and looked at the woman getting arrested and dragged to a police car. Before the police could put her inside the vehicle, she looked over her shoulder directly at my uncle, with rage in her eyes. He said he'll never forget that look. Dread overwhelmed him. Unfortunately, it gets worse. It turns out he was right about the woman. Her real name was not Maria, and she was part of a baby stealing operation which took people's children and then would sell their insides. The darkest part was the fact that the baby that was with her was no longer alive. In fact, the moment Maria got in the truck with my uncle, her insides had already been harvested and sold, and this woman was in charge of getting rid of the baby's remains somewhere. My uncle never saw that woman again. Creepy Phil, submitted by Ad. I'm a 27-year-old girl. This took place in 2010 when I was 20. I was a sophomore in college. I grew up in Western New York and also went to school in the same city that I grew up in. At the time, I was starting a 6-month internship for my degree program. This internship basically required us to track our walks around town, observe our surroundings, work on our communication skills. It wasn't particularly difficult, but it did have its challenges. At the time, my on and off again college boyfriend, Bobby, and I broke up. Now, this internship required us to work a large group of people that rotated, so that we had to work with everyone in this program at least once. I'm usually a friendly person, so I'll chit-chat or make conversation with someone if they initiate me. This was only a few weeks into this program, and I was assigned to work with a bunch of guys that I really didn't know. None of them I recognized from other classes. In this program, it is generally a male-dominated field, so the ratio of men to women was at least 5-to-1. My group got our gear ready, and we went on a walk. Almost immediately, one of the guys in the group approached me and began to talk to me. At this time, I realized how tall he was. I'm 5'6", so he was 6'6" easily. He was pleasant enough, and I was always taught to be polite. I engaged him in chit-chat, as it was going to be a long day, and it would help to pass the time. While we were talking, he happened to pull out his phone and mentioned Facebook and how we have joined recently, and at one point he pulls up my profile picture and says, "This is your number, right?" I was taken aback. I'm very private about my cell phone and was not aware it was listed on my account. I reluctantly nodded, to which he replied, "Okay, cool. I'm gonna save your number so we can text later. We can compare our tracking logs." I didn't say anything because we had to do that anyway, but we were supposed to do it over email. A few days afterward, he texted me for our tracking logs, and once that was done, he continued to talk to me. He asked if I wanted to hang out with him. He was nice, but he was somewhat awkward, and I was not fully comfortable around him just yet. He then continued to text me, asking me about myself and if I was dating anyone. Normally, I wouldn't give out that information, but my ex had recently broke up with me and I was feeling a bit burned from it. Having someone else pay attention to me was a bit flattering, even if it was somewhat awkward. After talking and texting each other for a few days, I had agreed to hang out with him to see if maybe there might be something there. In hindsight, I should have realized this was just a rebound. But at 20 years old with a broken heart, you tend to not think straight. We hung out around school a few times with a group of people, talking and getting to know each other. He was never rude, but made some awkward comments and compliments here and there that I nervously laughed off and accepted, because they were partly cheesy and I didn't want to be rude. I finally agreed to hang out with him at his house in the city. This would be the first time we really hung out with one another outside of school. I was nervous, anxious, and everything in between with my emotions. Once I got there, we started watching a movie and mentioned how my shift at work was this week. Since I got called in on one of my days off, he had said, "Oh, sounds like your manager's a real jerk. I saw her yelling at you even when you were helping her out." This struck me as odd, since I don't remember telling him where I worked, and I never mentioned this particular incident to him before because it was so recent. I didn't say anything about it though, I think because of shock, but I just remember saying, "Yeah, she really was." A week or so later, I'm working with my assistant manager, who I got along with really well. At the time, I worked for a woman's clothing store in a local mall that catered to middle-aged to older women. Technically, we weren't allowed to have our cell phones out, but the assistant manager I worked with was cool and let us hide ours at the register, and we could text when it was slow. It was one of the first nice days outside for that season, so I had on nice capris, a tank top, and a cute sweater with my hair in a nice updo. Our store only had one entrance. You can see all the way to the back of the store from the front, and the back door that led to the storage room, emergency exit, and the lockers for our belongings. There are no windows, and the emergency door was locked and alarmed. The only thing across from us was a tiny hardware store with a similar layout to ours. Suddenly, I get a text message from Phil. It said, "Wow, you look really beautiful with that outfit. It really shows off your body." I read this text immediately, and I started to freak out. I began to look around quickly and saw no one there, no one in the hallway of the mall or the hardware store across the way, except for the hardware store clerk. All I replied was, "Thanks." I continued to talk to my assistant manager, but felt extremely uneasy. More messages came in from him. Wow, you really know how to strut your stuff walking around that store. And don't be afraid to walk on over to my house later, babe. I didn't answer these messages, but they continued to come in. I continued to look around, frantically now, as I still did not see anyone besides the store clerk across the way. Yet Phil continued to text me details about exactly what I was doing each second. My assistant manager noticed, and I explained to her the texts. We were closing the store, and she insisted I have security escort me to my car. I leave work that night, and once I get into my car, the security guard heads back inside, and I start to get my stuff organized and get ready to head home. My phone goes off again, and it's Phil. Really? Why did you have someone escort you to your car? Do you think I'm going to hurt you? Do you think I'm going to take you or something? Why don't you trust me? I quickly locked my car and looked around. There were a few other vehicles in the large parking lot, but I could not see if anyone was sitting in their vehicles. I quickly started my car and I took off. I was officially freaked out. His awkward and cheesy compliments were one thing, but this was a whole different level. I saw Phil the next day at school, and I asked him if I could talk to him privately. As he acted like nothing happened, I told him I was not comfortable talking to him anymore. It became obvious that he did not like that. I lied, and I told him I think he's a great guy, but I was just not ready to get into something so soon. He then got this weird look on his face, shouted a quick, "Fine," and accused me of leading him on, stating that I was using him just to get back at my ex. I left it at that, because I was already creeped out and didn't really care that he was so upset. I avoided him as much as I could in my internship until it was completed, and by the end of the semester, I had successfully avoided him for a few weeks. During that time, I had recently got back together with my ex and were dating again. And that's when I started getting texts from Phil. So, this whole time you were just using me as a rebound. I could easily hurt your boyfriend. He's so small. It would be way too easy to get him. When he pulls into the driveway at his house, that's the perfect time. I was floored. He not only stalked me, but was now stalking and actively threatening my boyfriend. My boyfriend's house had a long, curvy driveway, with trees covering both sides of it, up until you get to his house, so he wasn't wrong. If you wanted to hurt my boyfriend, that would be the spot. I was done with this. I was officially scared for my life and my boyfriend's life. I blocked his number, his Facebook, his email, and told my friends if he asked to contact me, not to give out any information. I decided to finish up my degree over the summer to avoid having to go in the fall and graduate early so I did not have to ever see him again. It's been almost 7 years, and to this day, it still freaks me out that he followed me so closely everywhere. Not only me, but my boyfriend too. I have this fear that I'll run into him again one day, that he's still following me around. I'm now married with a 4-month-old son, and I'm still nervous thinking about it. Creepy Phil, please, let's not meet again. The Child Behind the Gravestone by Hussain. I am a Muslim from Maldives. I was with a classmate with whom I used to hang out with. It was 2009, so I was about 16 years old. The previous year, I had just finished my school life. That's when this paranormal activity happened to me, while this friend happened to be with me. One day he had called me and told me that his mother told him to get a plant to make a medicine, which is used for her body pain. It was almost 5:30 p.m. at the time, so we wanted to get finished as soon as possible. That way we could hang out before it got dark. The capital city of Maldives is Malé, where we don't see many trees, especially plants, which we use for this kind of purpose. So the only place we could find this stuff was at a nearby graveyard in the city. So we went to Asahara, main graveyard, to find it. At the time we got there, it was prayer time. It must have been 6:15 p.m. So first of all, we performed our salah. And after performing it, we asked the person who was in charge of the security of that place whether they had that particular plant. He just told us to check for ourselves, so we started to explore around looking for it. Luckily, we found an instance of it, but it was growing on top of one of the graves. It is said by our prophet that after the evening prayer, the jinn will become especially active. Even since our childhood, my mom always told me not to go out or take children out of the house at that time. We wanted to get this done, so we decided to just take it and go. The plant was not more than 2 feet high, so we knew that the root would not be deep down. I began to dig around the base of the plant while my friend was holding a bag to put it in. I was halfway down there when, out of tiredness, I raised my head just to take a little break. That's when suddenly I saw a small child staring at me behind a gravestone, which was 15 or 20 feet away from us. I was immediately creeped out. This was no normal child. It was full black like a shadow, all except for its face, as I could clearly see his eyes staring at us. My friend saw it as well, because I turned to see him facing towards it. Out of fear, I put my hand right under the root of the plant, and I summoned every bit of my strength to, in one go, yank it out. Then I placed it in the bag which my friend was holding. After putting it in the bag, I looked at my friend and I told him we needed to hurry and leave this place. We headed towards home after that. We made it to his house at around 7:30, and I was still extremely creeped out. I told him I was going to go ahead and head home, and that I would call him later. After getting home, I noticed that I had a fever which lasted more than 3 days. I didn't tell anyone about this story until a month after, at least. I have faced other paranormal activity before, but this one incident I'll never forget. Ever since then, even now, I feel like someone is always around me, watching. The Floating Women by Lauro Torres. 11:30 one night, I was on my way home from work. At the time, I didn't have a house, so I would sleep in my truck parked in my friend's driveway. We lived on a steep hill in East LA, known as City Terrace. It was around 12:30 when I finally got to my truck. Being so tired, I quickly hopped inside and started taking off my work boots. As I was taking off my boots, I realized a big bright shadow was coming down the hill. I looked up and saw a peculiar sight. It was a group of women wearing all white. As I looked closer, I saw that they didn't have any legs and appeared to be floating down the hill. As soon as I saw it, chills flooded over me, and I quickly grew afraid that she may have spotted me. I grabbed my phone and went to the camera to try and capture a picture of it. While I was grabbing my phone, these women had turned in my direction, and they passed right next to my truck door. I struggled to try to take a picture. The spirits, I believe, kept on going along the way, literally going right through the nearby fence and into my friend's backyard. This was the first time I've ever experienced anything like it. I was telling my things I was just tired, that I was paranoid, just seeing things. The next morning I woke up, and I told my friend about the experience. I even went over to the neighbors to talk about it, and I apparently wasn't the only one who saw the women. 2 of the other neighbors had seen them, as one of the floating women the previous night had stopped to stare into their window. Ugh, that gives me even more chills. Evil Thing by Anonymous. When I was a kid, we lived in a large city. I was around 8 years old when this incident occurred. I was a tall girl for my age and had blonde curly hair. I was outside goofing around alone when I saw this tall, athletic, tanned, blonde young man with tiny running shorts. It was the 80s after all, and he was not wearing a shirt. This was normal to me as we were only a few blocks away from a popular beach. The man approached me, then asked me a question that I thought was absolutely idiotic. "Could you tell me how to get to the beach?" It's just right down there. Turn left and go straight down," I said. He didn't seem to understand my directions and began to chat with me. I thought he was a total moron. I could find the beach with my eyes closed. Now, there's a gap in my memory between this point and what happened later. I don't know how he managed to take me where he did either. The next thing I remember is being in an underground apartment parking garage with him. He was still talking, making me feel uneasy, and then in a dark and all too quiet corner, he began to take off his shorts, and there was no clothing underneath that. He smiled down at me. Everything in my head told me to run, and so I did. I ran like crazy all the way home and told my mother, and she called the police. They didn't find that pervert. My mom told me years later that they were going to beat the crap out of him if they found him, but they never did. It haunts me what could have happened to me, and maybe even other children, since that guy was probably on the loose for decades. Not only are many cities crime-ridden, as is simply natural when people gather together in a compact spot, cities are apparently also haunting grounds for the most disturbing and visceral horrors that exist. When you're out on the street for a walk, or you're driving down those dark roads, lit dimly by barely maintained street lamps, remember to keep your eyes peeled, because if you don't keep an eye on yourself, there's already someone keeping an eye on you. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget, you can send me any of your true scary stories at darknessprevails.org. Particularly, I'm looking for scary stories about blizzards and snowstorms. If you want to support my channel further, donate any amount at patreon.com/darknessprevails. My patrons unlock ad-free MP3 downloads of each episode, and they get their names written in the credits at the end of my videos. Also, you can click that shop button below to check out my merchandise if you're on YouTube, or simply go to teespring.com/stores/darknessprevails. Now then, here are my 5 favorite early commenters from the previous video about 6 camping horror stories. Joel C. says, "Respond, or the bear gets it." What did the bear ever do? The only bear I have a problem with for the moment is Winnie the Pooh, and that's only because I accidentally stumbled upon some very disgusting Winnie the Pooh pictures. I know what you're thinking. Accidentally, right? The Random Stuff says, "I love camping. That's when the monsters can come out and get you." Well, the monsters of the forest might wait until nighttime to get you. But the human monsters that live in cities and the suburbs, they never wait, at least not for long, and they'll hunt you in daytime or nighttime. Robert Baker says, "Grilled cheese, please." I don't know what that has to do with the video, but I am really craving a grilled cheese as of late. Do any grilled cheese restaurants exist, like the one in Regular Show? If not, I wish, because I'd be there every day. Introverted Replay Button says, "I was planning on going camping, so okay. Well, I hope those horror stories didn't change your plans too much." And Caleb Steinman says, "What's that picture? That is the creepiest illustration yet." Well, I don't know exactly what it's supposed to be. Just something creepy and in the woods. But to me, it looks like the Blair Witch. Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode. But don't you worry, because more scary stories are just around the corner. So stay tuned. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to donate. Thank you all so very much. Remember, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.